George Stanton.
Vic Gonzalo.
Cheryl Towser.
Bob Brennan.
Guest, please.
Terry Green, election operations.
John Curry, election operations.
Bill Sexberg, Nysboe.
Rob Zegman, NIPEC, Tom Conley, citizen.
Thank you, everyone. First item of business, the minutes of the September 16, 2010 meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes as drafted.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Unit updates. Our co-executives, Bob Bremen, Todd Valentine.
Start. Well, we're all busy getting ready for the election, of course, and
That's an understatement.
it's an understatement. You know, so there's several fronts going on. Obviously, you
Let's
know.
start with move, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. We can start with move. That's probably the highlight or low light, depending on whose side you're looking at it.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it'd be nice for you to explain what move
Right.
is for people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, one of the major fronts we're focusing on is implementation of the Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment Act, which is designed to increase participation for voting by military citizens and their families, as well as citizens, New York residents who are overseas.
Right.
We often refer to them as UOCAVA voters, which is the Uniformed Overseas Citizen Voting Act. Our other shorthand for the overseas voters is special federal voters, because they're no longer residents here, but they're still entitled to vote for federal offices, which are obviously the two U.S. Senate officers, as well as any congressional office that they may have been eligible to vote for from the address before they left the United States. So they continue that same tie. So if they had moved from, wherever they moved from, they would continue to vote for that congressperson. But part of that federal legislation required that the state is under the federal law, should have mailed their military ballots out no later than 45 days before the election. But there was a provision within that dealing with states such as ourselves and others that don't have their primary until September, which means it's impossible to get the ballots out in 45 days. There was a waiver provision which allows us to comply to our 32-day statute. But our system for military ballots has a 45-day structure. 32 days they're supposed to get mailed out, and then 13 days they're allowed to receive, so there is a 45-day transit period. Unfortunately, there were a number of counties that were unable to meet that deadline. There was a variety of reasons.
A relatively small number.
A relatively small number.
That's right. 53 of the 58 counties
yeah.
met the deadline.
By and large, we had complied. The counties had done their job, but that's not full compliance in the eyes of the federal government. So they brought suit against us, and obviously, the fact of the matter is they didn't get mailed when we said we would mail them, or the counties didn't mail them. And we had come to in order to remedy that violation, not to steal
My entire report.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, they asked.
I don't care, go ahead.
No, Kim will report that.
In order to remedy that, because we couldn't turn the clock back in time. The only way to try to at least provide some remedial application to that was to extend the time that we would receive the ballots after the election from 13 days, add an extra 9 days to make it, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, to 44 days, and that's one element that satisfied the federal government. But the MOVE Act also has another part to it where, and this was new this year, which we've been struggling with. Bob and I have had done a lot of work, trying to get the contracts in place and the vendors in place to allow the ballots for the first time to be transmitted by downloading from a specific secure website to the voters in the field so that they can get their ballots there electronically. And that is up and running. All of those ballots were uploaded, and they're available to anybody who's eligible to vote for those across the entire state at this point, and they could just simply print it out, fill in the appropriate bubbles, and mail it back. And everything still has to be everybody still has to vote before Election Day. That is something that we really couldn't give on. But also part of the remedy, made sure that we spread the word out as wide and as far as we could through press releases, as well as public service announcements, which we posted on YouTube, whatever that's worth, and links out to publications that military voters and their families would see, predominantly Stars and Stripes, that is, as a global reach to the target audience, so to speak. At this point, we're gathering information from the counties as to exactly what they sent on which dates. I'll leave that to, I have not been looking at that on a daily basis, but that's, Kim has been collecting that with Anna's help from a lot of the counties to get that information back. Because, as you may know, we ask counties, we don't always get responses back right away, so sometimes it takes a little prodding, so to speak. So overall, our compliance has been good, and ultimately, the goal of the entire MOVE Act was obviously to increase participation. We're not really going to know the answer to that question until after the ballots come back. We're seeing, we see reports of the ballots that are returned, but we're not going to know that till after the election, whether it actually functioned as they intended it to. That it did increase participation. So we'll see. But
May I ask a question? How do you deal with all the court cases with candidates, all of that? When they go into court, does the judge know this is immediate, we have to get back fast, or I know that holds us up all the time. So
litigation is always a problem. I've got to be honest with you. This is the worst year I've seen for late litigation and lawsuits from a number of parties attacking. And it's different things. It's obviously not, if it was coordinated, we could actually address it but it has forced us to tap into resources that, since I've been here, we haven't had to do. We've had to go to outside counsel because the Attorney General had issues with conflicts of interest, so they couldn't represent us, and we certainly didn't have the resources in a couple of the cases. That's why Liz and Bill are out dealing with one issue out in Buffalo, because we had to hire outside counsel because the Attorney General couldn't represent us, and there was another case like that. We've also relied upon the Attorney General in those instances where we simply, our resources are stretched too thin trying to fend off, or address people who come in at the 11th hour claiming that there's this problem.
Right.
And those happen every year, but it's usually just like one. But now it's like half a dozen. And it's been very difficult because any response to those requires a lot of.
When we read things in the press, they often don't make note of that. They often just say, well, this happened, take care of it. I don't think they understand the full scope of what we're dealing with here, that these court cases, the need for outside counsel sometimes, and the Attorney General they are taking care of us in some cases.
Yep.
In some cases they can't, because it just they're not able to, and we've had to seek other counsel.
Yeah, no,
And
that's true.
I just feel bad about that sometimes that the press doesn't take the full scope of what's happening.
Well, a lot of the times you see with the press, the issues are narrowly focused to the story that
Yes.
they're reporting on. It's hard to put in perspective the entire election process in a short, 300-word
Absolutely.
article. It's just impossible. But with the rollout of the new systems has complicated a lot of this, because the
Yes.
litigation that we've often seen in the past towards the end of the election cycle, towards the election, where you could make late changes, were something that could be more easily accommodated in the lever world. That's not really the case in the optical scan world, in order to ensure the integrity of the system. So, and this is the first cycle we're going through that.
Yes.
The pilot program these issues did not arise last year.
Well, I think when you get volume, things arise, And I
Well,
think that Bob and Kim and Doug and I, with the counties we were in, as the day got later, things got better, I thought. We said, 6 o'clock in the morning, things were not as good as they were 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the different polling places we went to.
Yeah, well, the reports, and I don't...
And we were in about 5 counties.
I'm not going to steal Anna's thunder, because you did have a report on that.
Why
But
not?
You're on a roll.
Ditto.
But, we certainly had, not only ourselves, and I'll leave it to Anna to fill in the details, have analyzed how the primary went. We
Yes.
obviously had people in the field, but we also saw a report from the Comptroller's Office, both focusing on New York City and those counties outside of New York City. And the one thing I'll say is, the results in many instances between the three reports identified problems that we were aware of and were trying to address, but it's part of the pain of going through the transition to a new system.
To the new system, yes.
Yeah,
That's right. That's what they were like to me anyway, going around.
but yeah, that's the problem we're facing, and then it's just the general. We're running the agency in a time right now is difficult as well because our resources are stretched very thin. While we do have some resources from the federal government in terms of money and support from the Department of Defense for the MOVE Act, it's very difficult to get everything done. It's very
I've seen the
difficult.
counties seem to have that problem too. Their resources was stretched really, and certainly, and I saw that in Brooklyn, we saw it in Manhattan, and across, as I say, but as the day got, as later in the day, when more people were voting, as people learned what they, became more used to what they were supposed to do, things got better, greatly better. So I'm
Over
hoping.
time, and that's the lesson from other states that we've learned is that over time, obviously the rollout is always very difficult. It's new for the voter, new for the poll workers, but over
This is the
time,
first-
the
First change in 70 years.
yeah, it's big. Not
So
underestimated.
it has it has to have impact.
It has to have impact, but by and large, the reports that produced showed that nothing's perfect, but by and large, the system did function as it was intended.
Yes.
And there's clearly room for improvement. And some of the improvements we had already made, we had identified in the pilot program, but we know it's a work in progress.
I'm going to suggest one improvement. I've been suggesting that the ballot marking devices must be opened up and must be used. They're simple to use, and they would make a big difference. It's simple. They would move a line. You got a long line. You have that ballot marking device. It's very quick. So I suggest that. We've suggested it to all the counties again, and I hope they take advantage of it. Thank you.
To follow up with Todd, there was a great deal of energy, especially in the last 2 weeks, from everybody in the agency on MOVE in order to try and learn what happened, talk to the counties, answer questions, deal with the litigation issue, deal with the consent decree compliance, and just do as much as we could to provide a remedy that put the highest priority, making sure that people who are entitled to their ballot get it. And the new tool of the CITL MOVE Act download tool is just something that's new to us as a new remedy, and we're doing everything we can to educate people that immediately, wherever you are, you can go log into the system, the link from our website, tie into your record, and download your ballot. So even if you intended to receive it by mail, and because of whatever reason it didn't get to you yet, if today is the day that you can get your ballot, the system is fully functioning and will let them do that. And I think that's an important message to anybody that's listening and anyone who is able to help us to communicate that message. That's an important message to get out. We've all tried it in every communication we've had with the counties. The numerous email messages that they've spent the last several days making sure they get out, the work that John in the Public Information Office to get a public service announcement and get it posted on YouTube, to reach out to Stars and Stripes. Wherever we are, even the people who are angry with us for failing to get the ballots out timely, we take our lumps because we admit they did not go out timely. But you could also help us to communicate to people that the ballots are immediately available to anybody you hear from, family members. They all reach out with their own network to their family members overseas. We want them to know that they're available immediately. We've also done outreach with the state adjutant general's office. John reached out to them with our initial press statement and follow-up to make sure that, because that's a network within New York State that could work on top of all the other efforts that we're doing to get the word out, and they did confirm to us that they've sent it through their chain of command to make sure that anybody who can get a ballot is paying attention. We're also working with OVF and CITL to more prominently display two additional items on our website. It's in production, and hopefully as soon as they get it done, we'll see it very soon. One is the link to actually get your ballot. It's there, but if we can make it a little bit more prominent. And the other, for overseas voters, there is Express Your Vote, which is a program that OVF and others have throughout Europe and the overseas areas in 90 countries that allow voters to use that program and promptly, it's through Federal Express, get their ballots back in time. So we're doing whatever we can to get the word out. Your ballots are available, and here are these other links that help you get them back timely. And it has spent a great deal of time working on it because it's such an important item. That being said, we've also submitted our budget during this last period of time. We still have to work on our budget side letter as we do every year, where at least we articulate those items where we think we need to at least let people know there are additional responsibilities that aren't covered by the budget message, which was come in at the same level as our fill level was approved that we're currently at now. So we did meet that requirement, but we're also working on the side letter, which can go over probably after the general. There's no real deadline for that as long as we get it to them reasonably before December 1st. And that's pretty much the highlights.
Anyone have any further questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Legal, Kim Galvin.
Well, we have been very busy, and other than what Todd and Bob have said, the official report back to the Department of Justice on the MOVE-Act consent decree is due today. As of this time, 2 counties have not responded at all to us, despite repeated calls, faxes. We've done everything we could, so just before I came up here, we made one last effort to reach out to them, and if they don't
What are the
respond,
2 counties?
Genesee and Herkimer. And if they don't respond, New York City has also not provided their official written report, but they told us that it's coming, and they have provided us in bunches of information, various things that we could put together. But Genesee and Herkimer, regardless of many efforts, have not responded at all. So those will be the 2 that are reported as non-compliant if I have to do that. Other than the cases that you are aware of in the Western District, the Southern District, Nassau, and the change of venue that I think Paul will speak to, and the appeals pending surrounding that, the most recent case was a case filed out in Erie County 2 days ago now, I think, involving the 8th Judicial District and the ballot layout. The candidate is requesting changes to the ballot structure at this point in time. The Attorney General is going to appear for us out there. Anna has been a great deal of help to me, and we are still in the process of getting those papers out to them for service. They have to be served on the opposing parties this afternoon. And also, the Erie County Board of Elections has been very helpful in facilitating a lot of the communication with the AG's office or providing backup documentation. So for any counties that are listening, of all of the pending cases, that is the only one still alive. It isn't. There's another one.
Credico.
Oh, Credico. Yeah, forget it then. I'm not going to Credico's.
No.
Yeah.
And, I
I
think
don't-
we should just reiterate that I think that there's a consensus throughout the agency that it is already past the deadline when we can comply with a court order to change the ballot. And where there is no mistake by the agency And all we have done is carried out a state law that's been in effect for many years. In the case of the 8th Judicial District,
Same.
that ballot format has been the same since 1890, when the government first started printing ballots. And
Yeah, one of the arguments is even if we did what they said, then we're directly in contravention of what the statute specifically orders us to do, and then everybody else could
Right.
come in and say
So-
whatever.
And then in the Credico case that has already been argued before Judge Deary in the Southern District, again, he's asking to declare unconstitutional a statute that's been in place for many decades, and where the board just carried out its ministerial duty to set up the ballot exactly as the statute applied. And in those cases, it is completely unreasonable for candidates to wait until 2 weeks before the election. And so
Yeah, we have.
I, for one, will be urging that, well, I don't even want to predict. I think we
No,
should
but we
assume
have-
the judges are going to do the right thing.
Right.
And
We have reemphasized at every level of every court that the time has passed, and it just highlights just one last point that I'd like to make before I ask Paul if he has anything to add, is that what these court cases have done, again, is raise to the forefront the desperate need for certain changes that I can see in the statutory framework or the timeframes, or this isn't the lever machines where you can go out and just make a change to these things with a minimal amount of time. These are, extraordinary, time-consuming changes that require a great deal of effort and time. And fortunately, I think we're going to come through this cycle of lawsuits, relatively unscathed in the whole resultant, whatever results. But there is going to be a time where one of these lawsuits and one of these courts is going to make a change, and we are not just going to be able to effectuate it. And we are going to run the continuing problem of without waivers from the federal government being in violation of the federal statutes as well. So I know that this is almost the time of year where we start putting together the legislative packet for the legislature next January or February. So I would just urge the commissioners and everyone, whoever we speak to just reemphasize again, this is not like, we really should change these because it might make things easier. These are things that need to be changed in order that we can ensure that these elections and these candidates are given, all the due process that they're deserving of. So, other than that, Paul?
Kim, do you know how many federal cases we had? And just for the public, and how many federal cases did we receive this year since the primary?
Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, was it 4? 4,
Western, Southern.
6,
I just-
Southern, well,
We had some.
we have the Western District, the Southern District, the Northern District has, 2 kind of pending. What are the, what do you see in the Southern?
Conservative
Second
looking
Southern
family.
District. That's the
Yeah.
other one. So,
Many.
Many.
a lot.
Too many.
Too many.
Too many where we've had to just break up in certain staff. I mean, like Todd said, Liz is in Buffalo, Paul's been watching some parts of the state, Todd's been watching the other.
I know you
I've been
have.
dealing with the consent orders and the state cases, and, Bob and Anna and everybody else have been involved in doing whatever we need to do to get it done. So it has been busy. It's been fun, but it'll be nice when it's over.
Yeah.
Paul, do you have anything to add on the Nassau County change of venue or anything?
Well, the interesting thing is, it's a nice segue into that, excuse me. The Supreme Court judge in Nassau County has ruled to move the case from Nassau County to Albany County, where it should have been brought. What happened is that it was a two-tiered case, if you will, an Article 78 proceeding and a declaratory judgment proceeding. And Nassau admitted, reading the statute, that the Article 78 proceeding had to have been brought in Albany. And the declaratory judgment proceeding, we felt, should have been brought in Albany as well. To make a very long story short, Nassau then sought to sever the case and have just the Article 78 come up to Albany, leaving the declaratory judgment action in Nassau. Judge Woodard correctly ruled, in our opinion, correctly ruled that, wait a minute, you're not getting two bites of the apple here. We're not running two cases on essentially the same concept. And apropos Commissioner Kellner's comments, Judge Woodard sort of gave Nassau the back of her hand on their argument that, well, wait a minute, to send this case to Albany will cause a delay. And frankly, the judge correctly pointed out the statute that you're challenging is 5 years old. Where you been? So don't speak to me of delay. And she moved the case to Albany County. There is another case in Suffolk County that seeks essentially the same relief to stop the use of the new machines. And we were not a party to that litigation, and we were directed to have been joined. The plaintiff still hasn't joined us. And Suffolk County went into the appellate division because the judge had scheduled a hearing on a preliminary injunction to enjoin the use of the new machines. And they got a stay from the appellate, they got a TRO, a temporary restraining order pending the court making a determination. And that is returnable this morning. And I filed papers in that as well in support of the continuation of the stay of the proceedings in the court below. But it all speaks to the same thing. People running in at the very 11th hour, challenging things that everybody knew, sure as God made little green apples, were coming. And that's where we are on those two cases. The Nassau case also involves an issue of the confidentiality of the technical data package of the vendors. The judge granted the application of ES&S for a confidentiality order after having refused our argument in that regard, but and issued an actual confidentiality order that we supplied. Nassau has taken an appeal from that, the granting of the confidentiality order. We had previously filed an appeal of her granting discovery in this case at this time with motions to dismiss pending, etc. Notwithstanding the transfer of the case itself to Albany County, those two appeals will continue to reside in the second department. And I suppose what we'll have to do is move to join them and go forward. Everybody seems to have a better way than the state legislature.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ken. Election operations, Anna?
Thank you, Commissioner. We didn't burden our monthly report with the minutia of what we do, but maybe I should have because I'm pretty much left without a monthly report. It is what it is. It's not an easy process. Anybody that thought that this first year rollout was going to be without incident really underestimated what goes into making this happen. We are working closely with boards. We do have a help desk that answers calls day and night from home. Boards are working around the clock, and our staff is available to them. They all have our email addresses, and if they contact us, we'll get back to them and work through their issues with them. Our concerns of late are with TestX. We have some people on site monitoring boards and their understanding of the TestX process. We're going to be following that up with an email and setting up conference calls or video conference calls with them as necessary to make sure that they understand how a TestX is to be compiled and also performed, because that's the key to everything working well on Election Day. So that is a focus of ours right now. The primary report from our on-site visits does speak for itself. The issues remain people-oriented. I'm happy to tell you that every county in the state except one, and the one is not New York, has reported the completion of their 3% audits, and every single one of them, in not a single one of them did the audit have to be escalated beyond the 3%. These scanners are working the way they're intended to work, and any anomalies that the board has had, they have been able to attribute to a printing error, bad marking pens, and things like that. These scanners do work. What it takes to get a ballot together to make the scanner work on Election Day is yeoman's work. You can't recommend economies of scale to boards or shortcuts in any of that unless the boards go through the process and really understand the magnitude of what they're doing. This is a new responsibility for them, and it's not easy work, but it's important that they do it, that there is no vendor intervention in that process. So with them having done it in the primary and now in the general election, we'll have a chance to, work with them region by region, look at their issues, and see what we can do by way of training or working with vendors to perform more training or enhance the training materials that they do provide or the sessions that they've conducted to date. That's important to us. I think these boards need all of that support on all of those levels, and they've clearly paid for it. And again, without realizing what it's like to go through this the first time, there are no shortcuts to be had. Our focus, again, is a result of the comments from the on-site reviews that we conducted on primary day, are people-based, the font size, the contest delineations, and things like that. We are committed, I think, as an agency to visit these issues and focus on ballot usability and engage whatever kind of support we can to review those issues. Clearly, there might be statutory issues that have to be addressed because our ballots are built the way the law tells us to. So if we want to build them any differently, we have to start with that framework. So we'll be working with our colleagues in the legislature at the staff level to let them know what our concerns are and see what suggestions they have for what might be changed and what we will continue to live with. Other than that, the report after today's board meeting will be available to John to put on the website. And we can have copies for you if you want. We can send it electronically as well. And I am happy to answer any questions that you have other than those that have been raised so far.
Is there any really big concerns you have for Election Day, Anna? I know, we all have them, don't get me wrong. But I'm saying, is there anything?
Acts of God, I think. I think, we've tried to.
We could, in any way help you with.
I really don't think so. I think this has to play its course, and it's, we're just trying to make sure that the boards have dotted, if not all the I's and crossed T's, then as many of them as they can think of and we can help them think of. And that's why I think the reviewing with them the test decks, other issues come up in those conversations. So there's more than just test decks to learn about from that. So we have 4 or 5 of our team downstairs working on that right now. Other than that, I just think, as I said, these boards have done tremendous work. They've never done this work before.
I know.
And they've really taken on a lot. Some of them have been more aggressive than others. They cowboyed up earlier. They have really done an awful lot of work, and I think other boards have tried to do as much as they can. They have limited resources, limited staff, limited technical skills available in the staff that they're allowed to hire at the dollars that the county's making available for those positions. So, there's a whole triage that goes before building a ballot and running an election, and maybe
Some of those counties were held back on money too, weren't they?
Absolutely.
I heard
I don't think the
some
counties
stories.
have understood how serious this is,
Yeah.
and I don't know that they understand that maintenance of effort. You can't use all this federal money to do what is the county's obligation already in the statute. So, there's a learning curve there for everybody. But I think once the county boards have gone through this and they can quantify the kind of work that's gone on and the hours they've put in at the staff level that doesn't get paid for those hours, that when they share that with the counties, that maybe there's some accommodation they can all come to.
I even know New York City didn't get the money they requested, all the money that they thought they needed and requested. So it's been difficult, no two ways about it. Money's tight all over right now, so it doesn't hurt, it doesn't help.
Commissioner Kellner.
Anna, on the audits, if I understand you, that all but one of the counties had no escalations of audits, but the counties did identify issues where the machine acted correctly, but the ballots may not have been counted, or the count had to, the hand count would have been different because of things like printing issues and the way voters mark the ballots.
Yes.
And I wanted to emphasize that that's an important part of the audit process, to identify those issues, because we all learn then more about how the machines are working and more about what we need to do with our voter education, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that going to be collected up and put into a report so that the details will be available for everybody to review?
What we get from the county boards is a certificate signed by the commissioners, and to the extent that they've appended their information, as these two boards did, we can compile that and share it with you. The board that was still doing audit reports when I prepared this was Erie, and they had, I can't recall now, and I don't want to misquote them, but they did have a couple of scanners left in their audit process. They had encountered no problems to date, so I have no reason to think that they will as they complete that. We just don't have their certificates in yet. But we will prepare a report that describes the situations that the board shared with us. And again, in conversation, we may learn more than they documented in those certificates, so we'll include that anecdotal information as well.
Well, I would appreciate it, and I think that we should, provide as much information from the audit process as possible that will help in the learning process.
We can certainly
as well.
send them an email and include a form that they can document that when they do their 3% audits from the general election, and we gather, obviously, more voters will be out.
Right.
There will be more information to share, and I'm sure the counties won't mind telling us a little bit more about what they're doing.
Well, and we'll hear it anecdotally at the next conference.
That's true. That is true.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, Anna. Public Information Officer, John Conklin.
Thank you, Commissioner. My apologies for not having a written report in your packets. I missed the deadline for this month, so you're going to have to listen to me go through the whole thing. I'll try and be quick. We sent out a press release reminding the public about the voter registration deadline for October 8th. It received very wide coverage, at least upstate, and I heard it was reported on most upstate radio and television stations, including in this area. I saw it frequently, so that was a great help to us. We sent out a press release on the consent decree with the Department of Justice concerning the measures taken to ensure that the military and overseas absentee voters were able to handle their ballots and have them returned and counted. The release was distributed nationally, as well as to the International Herald Tribune, the Stars and Stripes, USA Today International, Military Times, and through the National Guard, through the cooperation of the State Adjutant General's Office. Also in compliance with the consent decree, we've written a radio and TV PSA for distribution throughout New York State aimed at any family members of military personnel and non-military overseas voters who can alert them to the extended deadline. That began playing on Tuesday. The radio started on Tuesday. The TV started yesterday. We worked with New York Network, which is part of SUNY, and our friends at the New York State Broadcasters Association to do that. We also posted that PSA on YouTube yesterday, so we'll be linking to that very shortly, so that the State Board's website will be able to show it or at least link to it, and then we'll ask the local counties to do that as well. We've made some updates to the subject matter list on the website as required by the Freedom of Information Law. We posted the transcript for the September board meeting. We posted the official results of the primary for those offices that file their petitions with the State Board. We posted the official certified general election ballot. We posted the special election calendar for the 29th Congressional District. We completed our research on a selection for the annual conference for next spring. We contacted 5 hotels in the region, and our recommendation is to use the Desmond. It meets our needs for availability, vendor space, and conference space. So I need to thank Donna Malahy for helping me out in doing that. The dates for the conference are going to be the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th of April in 2011. There continues to be a heavy call and email volume of inquiries from the press and the public regarding all of the things I've mentioned here. And tomorrow will be the 11-day pre-general for campaign finance reports, so there'll be another influx of activity from that as well for our office. Just quickly, and we're also going to be running an ad in Stars and Stripes on the MOVE Act that will start Wednesday and run through the day before Election Day. And just lastly, for the NVRA unit, we had a significant increase in the voter registrations leading up to the deadline on October 8th. The unit processed those in a timely fashion with some help from the other units in the building, particularly campaign finance and the council's office staff. And lastly, we conducted the semi-annual NVRA agency training in New York City, and that was completed on September 16th and 17th. Any questions?
Thank you, John.
Great.
Campaign finance?
Good afternoon. Campaign Finance has submitted our written report for review. We'd just like to let everyone know that tomorrow the 11-day pre-general report is due, so if people haven't filed, it'd be a good time to do so. And that's our report for today.
Any questions? Thank you. ITU, George Stanton.
Yeah, and thank you, Cheryl. Of course, Liz is in Buffalo now on the big lawsuit brought by National Organization of Marriage to challenge the constitutionality of the requirement that there be reporting by political action committees. Your office has spent a lot of time working with Buffalo Council on that lawsuit, and I just didn't want to let it pass because it has been a major effort that I think all of us here have been committed to defending the New York statute that requires political action committees to file and report, and that's been very important. And of course, there have been a number of other activities going on in the campaign finance unit, including that you've timely gotten out, I think, the largest filing in the history of the board in terms of the number of committees filing for this year's general election, and they've gotten out on time the prosecutions for the non-filers. So the system is being held together, even though I know there's so much more that we could be doing there if we had the staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my apologies. I should not have let that brief report slip by so quickly like that, because I do forget there are people watching this who are not in this room today, and there's an enormous amount of work being done in your department, and we've heard from other people the legal work that's been going on, and the lawsuits, and just the enormous pile of work that has to be done. I know you're only sitting in here, so your report was as short as it was, but my apologies for not explaining why. Thank you, and thank you for your department's work. ITU, George?
Well, the fortunate thing for everybody that I go last is that most everything that we do has been covered, and they don't have to listen to me talk very long. But mainly we've been, like everybody else, concentrating on things surrounding the election cycles, doing all of the campaign filings and printing the letters, 5-day letters, those kinds of things. Supporting the ballot that's posted on the website. All of the other web updates that we've been doing with the MOVE and OVF and all of that kind of thing. We've been supporting counties with their Nysboe voter activities at the help desk level. And assisting the PIO's office with a lot of ad hoc reports that people ask for, always at this time of the year. We've been proactively monitoring all of the systems that support the whole agency IT area, and other than that, we're just living large and enjoying life down there.
I didn't mean that, John.
Any questions?
You're right to that.
Thank you very much, George. I have under old business a follow-up on Dominion ES&S. Now, I know, Paul, you already made some reference to that. Do you have anything else to add to the comments you made earlier?
Well, what really has to be done, Commissioner, is we have to make a determination of two items. First, the items that the vendors have claimed confidentiality with respect and determine whether they should be exempt from FOIL as proprietary information, trade secrets, etc., then, in accordance with our own regulations, which items, irrespective of their trade secret status or not, should be exempted from public disclosure under FOIL to preserve the integrity of our essential operation here of running these elections using, this software and these new machines. We have a report on each vendor from NYSTEC, which segregates them, and I suppose if the commissioners were so inclined, we could simply accept that report and roll it into a resolution with respect to each vendor and fulfilled our obligations. I did a draft report, but I suspect you may wish to discuss some of this.
To me, it's more important to get the resolution adopted to notify the vendors that we don't accept their confidentiality claims. And I'd be prepared to vote on that now, if we can do it. This has been a matter that's been around for 18 months. Has this been circulated yet?
No.
Have you? So Todd and Kim haven't seen it, all right. Well, I asked at the last meeting, and I understand the legal department has been absolutely overwhelmed since the last commissioners meeting. So I'm not suggesting that there was any way that you could have done more than what you've done in the last month. But I really would hope that we can circulate a draft and have the commissioners vote so that we can get this process going, so that the materials that the vendors submitted in connection with the certification can be publicly available. And of course, it's also timely because we have one or two lawsuits, I think it's 2 lawsuits pending now, where those documents are being produced in discovery under a very extensive confidentiality order. And in my view, it's really not fair to the plaintiffs in those cases that they be covered by this really tight confidentiality order when so much of these documents should be made public, under the original understanding that we had that we would make public everything in the certification process except documents that specifically impacted security or proprietary claims of the vendors. And I add that I'm very skeptical of the vendors' proprietary claims because everything is patented. And when you patent something, you can't retain a proprietary claim on it. The whole point of patenting it is to make it public, even though it's in very technical jargon when you file the patent so that people can't really read it. And yes, they had to descramble that jargon in the certification process, but I think that we would all be better served by making those materials available to the public sooner rather than later. And even with the Nassau County litigation, while I certainly disagree with the underlying premise that the state law is unconstitutional, in a sense, Nassau County is performing a service if it's done fairly and properly and without bias of examining our certification process with additional experts that Nassau County is funding. And as I say, if it's done without bias and properly, then everybody benefits through that process. And therefore, I think that getting the confidentiality issues resolved sooner rather than later is in everybody's interest.
I agree.
So can we aim for next meeting, please?
Is it too soon? I don't know.
I know. Paul is thinking how many times is going to be hauled into court between now and... 3 weeks from
That's
now.
true.
Well, AIM,
Maybe for the December meeting. Maybe.
AIM is approved by all the commissioners.
And you can miss your aim.
Right.
Well, Commissioner, to quote the old Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles must start with the first step.
Right.
I have a resolution, we can circulate it, but there are substantive issues that have to be addressed. I mean, the resolution, someone's going to have to go through those NYSTEC reports and see, do we agree, do we not agree, et cetera.
I think I've already sent my comments on it about 2 months ago or so.
Any further
All right,
discussion?
so let's circulate it within the agency, get the comments, and get a resolution in front of the commissioners for the next
Right.
meeting if we can.
Good. Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Discussion of ballot usability. Todd and Bob?
Well, we've talked about this before. I mean, it's really just to remind people, particularly in light of the recent reports from the primary election that we've seen from both the Comptroller's office and certainly our own report, that this is an issue that, and I know we'll see it again in the general election because we really couldn't change the entire ballot between the primary and the general. But this is a project that, and that there are systemic issues that we need to address with the ballot that we're starting to see as we transition to the optical scan. I mean, I'll just highlight the one that people hit on the most is certainly the size of the print. Well, that's a function of many other things, so you have to analyze that in context with all the other, why is the print so small? Well, the paper's only so big, and, all those issues have to be in there, but you can also look at the other elements that appear on the ballot and what purpose do they serve, and can they be addressed in a different way that would allow you, within the limited paper size, to then increase the size of the print. So, I mean, that's just one issue that you have to analyze, but it's also it's part of the process. So it's not just ballot design, it is usability. It's a slightly broader issue.
Todd, there were 2 main points that I wanted to make in adding this to the agenda or continuing this on the agenda. The first time this was put on the agenda was in connection with the overvote screens. And I want to make sure that we stay focused on the need following the elections to address the issue, along with a collection of other minor tweaks that we want to make to the programming and the source code of the machines. That involves a couple of things. Anna, this is real important that I'm really doing this for your benefit because it's operations that I'm really concerned is just needs the extra push to make this a higher priority. And I know there's so many things going on, but so number one is that immediately following the election, we need to quickly identify all of the source code and machine programming issues and put together the budget or the plan within the agency on how we're going to get these resolved. We still have open compliance issues with the vendors in terms of a couple of open items on the security issues that remain open. Those are obviously vendor responsibilities to correct them at their expense. To the extent that we are modifying source code because of screens or other programming issues or new statute issues, that may be our responsibility. And we need to put together a plan and make sure we have HAVA funds available to do that. And I assume that the counties are aware of some of the issues being raised about the overvote and double vote issues. that we be assembling data on that to see just how significant it is, and if only to determine how much it's worth spending to address those issues. So that was one subject within the topic of usability, which is just to make sure that while we're carrying out our general election duties, we're thinking about the next steps and being ready for that. The second thing is an issue that we've discussed before and that Todd addressed, which is the formatting of the ballot and the making sure that the operations unit is acquiring expertise on ballot usability and ballot design. We have the Brennan Center report that was issued a year ago, and many of the ballots, without being statutorily complied, don't take up on all of the issues that are raised in those guidelines for ballot usability. And I believe that the U.S. Election Assistance Commission has essentially adopted that same Brennan Center report and has been providing it to local jurisdictions. So one of my suggestions is that it's very important that within the election operations unit that there be staff who get the full training so that they know these usability issues inside out, and that we in turn work with the counties to make sure they're implementing these guidelines. And as I say, it's not statutory. So, for example, the big issue in New York City today that hit the press is Brennan Center had gone to New York City and said, look, you've got a problem with your ballot instructions. Your ballot instructions don't match your ballot. And not surprisingly, New York City ignored them. And actually, I shouldn't say not surprisingly, because the right thing for New York City to have done when they were contacted with this is to say, we'll correct the error, instead of saying, well, we followed the statutory language, even though the statutory language specifically says that you can change the instructions to match the machine.
Right.
And you know, the specific issue of what they did is that the instructions say to vote for a candidate whose name is printed on this ballot, fill in the oval above or next to the name of the candidate. But the ovals are below the names of the candidates. So, and you know, I think, well, so what? You know, does a voter need to even read the instructions in order to figure out how to cast the ballot? But if you're going to have instructions, then they should match what's on the ballot. And I guess the concern and the reason I'm taking up everybody's time with this is that this is really important, and I don't think that everybody has fully absorbed just how important this is. And you know, another example is the Albany County ballots, also followed by many other jurisdictions. I think most of the jurisdictions that use Dominion in the primary, where they had, where the write-in boxes were just located, in my view, in completely the wrong place. I'm sorry, it's the ES&S, thank you, Paul, that it was the ES&S counties that the write-in boxes were located in a place that was very misleading to the voters, and we've heard back anecdotally that many voters did not correctly cast their ballots because of the location of the write-in boxes. So again, I turn to Anna and I sort of beg and say, we really need to say, okay, X person in election operations is going to be our usability expert, that person needs to know the usability guidelines from the Election Assistance Commission and the Brennan Center reports by heart, and how to apply them, and be in a position to train the counties so that we can get this right. And then I guess there's a third issue, which is for us to be thinking about, is that should we do a usability study of our own and straighten out once and for all which is more usable? The New York City format of listing the offices in the columns and listing the parties in the columns and the offices in rows, or the format that everybody else in the state follows, putting the parties in rows and I got it backwards.
I'm
All
almost
right,
not
I'm
too
sorry.
worried about that, Doug. I'm more worried about the
Well-
size of the print.
Well, there should be.
That's my
All right,
biggest
well,
thing.
let me just, there should, my view is that one form is probably more usable than the other. We should just decide which is more usable and then tell everybody to do it that way, so that there's uniformity throughout the state, and candidates can, in their advertising then, have essentially the same ballot everywhere instead of having to be concerned which county they're in.
My concern is the print.
All right, now on the print, Todd already addressed that. You know, we went, I don't like the,
Supply magnifying glass.
I don't like the I told you so's
They
on
do,
this.
but it doesn't.
But I kept saying we should have 17-inch wide scanners instead of 8.5-inch wide scanners. And I've been saying this for 5 years, and we actually got the companies to bid on it. It would have raised the cost of the machines by 30 or 40%.
Fine. I just hope-
All right, go ahead.
To address Commissioner Aquila's specific concern as to the size of the print, at every polling place in this state, we have a ballot marking device. One of the features of is that it augments the size of the print on the ballot. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, many counties feel that that instrumentality is only for voters with disabilities. It isn't. And any voter may use it, and particularly any voter who has difficulty, reading it. And we need to get that message out.
Well, I had asked Bob to do that, get that message out, to open up, make them say to everybody, we have a ballot marking device here, please use it. When we were out on Election Day, that seemed to be the thing that bothered the voters the most. They're not into the technical too much. I mean, I'm sure they would like a line across or a line down or whatever, but they weren't as concerned about that, because it was a primary vote. They were concerned about is reading the name of the person they wanted to vote for.
Right.
They come in and they're saying, I'm voting for Joe Jones, and they're looking and they can't read his name. That is a serious problem. And yes, they give you this big glasses to put on so it will magnify, and I saw the people using it come out and say, that made it worse. So I didn't understand what that was all about. And I'm very, very concerned on a day when there will be many more voters than there were on primary day. And the bulk of our voters are always, at least 30% of them, senior citizens. They go in and they look at this ballot and they say, the heck with this, and they walk out. Because if you can't see who you're going to vote for, you're not inclined to vote for anybody. And to see people try on the magnifying glass and say, you put them around like big glasses and say, I still can't vote, is discouraging. And it's very discouraging that you have to say to people, if you want to vote, put on magnifying glasses. So somehow, the print is about as big as the print on here, if not a little smaller.
Smaller, I think.
I'm telling you. And I'm concerned about people just not voting when they see that, and people going home and saying to people in their family, don't bother to go down and vote or go up and vote wherever, because you can't read the ballot. And that's the last thing we want to do. We want to encourage people to vote. I certainly have said it. I said it to the New York board, and I think they realize it. And I've said it here, but I think it's a really, really serious concern. And that's something, at least if it doesn't get taken care of for this year, for next year, maybe we can maybe you give them a ballot that's 4 pages long, but at least they can read what they're doing and they turn the page and go on the next page. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that field, but I know I know what can't be done, my years in education and things like that. I know certain things you wouldn't put before an 8th grader to say, read this small. If it was a test, you wouldn't, so I'm concerned. I'm sorry.
I think these are all very serious concerns. I think we'll hear echoed back from all the counties as time goes by here, so this is not something that's going to disappear as of today's meeting, I don't think. And
I would hate to
and
pick
for
up the
good
paper
reason.
the next day and have that be the headline.
Right.
Uniform standards are important for, the ballot design, ballot font, from the words we've heard from people. Certainly you can go, the size of the paper is what you get to a certain limit. But then the perforated ballot, if you need to have a certain size type and your group of contests require a larger piece of paper, then you have to go to a perforated piece of paper. And from an administrative point of view, we continue to hear from counties that go up against, well, I can have it to an X size ballot, but then if it has to go to a perf, we're going to have to do things differently. They need to all have uniform standards so that we're not shrinking the size of the type just to get to the smaller piece of paper, knowing that people can't use that size, can't comprehend the words on that page.
Plus-
That's not the way to solve the problem. The size of the problem.
Cost is a great deal of concern to them.
All of it. So if we can deal with, where on the ballot the critical information needs to be, so it's there, but still providing as much room as possible for offices and candidates. I think that's where we're going to look and have uniformity.
Well, taking the words of one of the candidates for governor, it's too damn small.
Just lower the reps and everything.
A good conclusion to that. Item 4, new business. Good. A vote on resolution to approve the Havoc Grant administration by the New York State OGS. Robert Bremen, Todd Valentine.
When we had the good fortune earlier this year to be visited from the federal Election Assistance Commission staff dealing with grant administration to work with us and to review our program. And it was one of the items that they noted during their review of the support we are receiving from the Office of General Services, that most other states had a certain administrative reimbursement for the work that's done, kind of the back file, to make sure all of the documentation is in place. One, so that when they do come to audit us, we can answer correctly what we've done, but to make sure we're following all the rules. We were followed up by the actual federal audit, and the federal auditors shook their head at us and actually commented to us during the process that they were surprised to learn that this didn't happen. We have worked very hard to champion all our Havadalah resources as best we can, especially in this climate of fiscal cutbacks everywhere, to make sure that we have the money available for the work that we really need to do. And OGS has asked us if we would consider reimbursing them for a sum not to exceed $75,000 for the tremendous effort that they do to administer these grant programs for us. And so we put that as a recommendation to you to consider today.
Any questions? Excuse me.
Move the resolution.
Have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Before we proceed, we want to set our next meeting date.
Were there issues about certification deadlines that will control when we need to meet in November?
December,
Well, it would be December, so.
I think at the rate we're going, closer to December 14th, 15th would be.
Well, December 15th is the deadline, so to speak, so it would be prior to that. We can meet no later than December 15th in order to certify the election.
That's under state law, and it's December 13th for Congress.
13th is what the clerk of the House of Representatives sent to us as a deadline. These military ballots can come back by the 20.
They're scheduled to come back by the 24th, so.
The 13th is a Monday. I mean, if we put it too early, we're always chasing after these reports in the first place.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
maybe we shouldn't set a date right now then and just circulate proposals when you're ready. I don't,
That's fine with me.
it's just that our calendars are gonna start to fill up
Yeah.
if we don't set aside.
Yeah, in December.
Well, you could-
Unless you want to do Monday the 13th as a tentative date.
That's an idea, yeah.
And something
When?
along that, Monday, December 13th.
And not meet in November at all?
Oh,